Hi, everybody. I wanted to first thank the Tompkins County Progressives for having this forum so folks could get to know candidates better, like myself. And so first question is, why am I running? The main reason I'm running is to bring working class families' voice to the seat at the legislature, which I see is underrepresented right now. I come from a working class family. My father was an electrician, and most of my family was in unions. I helped tutor my mom to get her GED so she could get a union job. I was the first one in my family to go to college, so I was very fortunate, and I worked in healthcare for 22 years. I was able to work with a lot of different diverse populations, such as people who are elderly, people who had psychiatric or physical disabilities. I worked in addiction treatment, alternatives to incarceration, and also vocational training, my card says here. I've always been a strong patient advocate. One place where I was working was a psychiatric center, and when they were closing down the facility, they were transitioning elderly folks who didn't have family into the community, and there were a lot of adverse effects that they were having because they were suddenly being moved without notice. So I called the state patient advocate, and they halted that transfer program until a more humane process could be developed. And I reinvented myself a few years ago by changing my career to home inspection. So I went back to school, and now I have a successful small business. And I'm really fortunate to do that because it brings me to a diverse group of people all throughout the area. People that are really struggling to get a house for the first time or to maintain their house and to be able to afford to live here. In 1984, so I see some people looking back where you were right then, but I moved to this area from Albany, away from my family, because this area seemed very progressive. It was very affordable at that time, and because of the natural beauty, including the clean air and clean water. And so to help maintain that, I worked with the Sierra Club for a long time. I was the chair of the Finger Lakes Sierra Club group, and we helped alert people to the dangers of fracking. And another thing that I helped with was we had my wife and I, we have solar panels at our house, and we could do net metering, which makes it more affordable. And businesses and farms at that time couldn't do that. So through the Sierra Club, we initiated legislation. And so now when you're driving around, I know I'm very happy and touched when I drive around and you see solar panels on businesses and farms. Other volunteer work that I've done have been serving on the boards of Fight Back of Central New York, Black Oak Wind Farm, and myself, along with a couple of people in this room, were co-founders of a new group, LGBT plus group, and it's called Finger Lakes Pulse. We were responsible for getting the pride flag put up in many places around the county, many towns, the city here, and the county. We also just had our first fundraising event where we raised money not only for our group, but we split the proceeds with Planned Parenthood. So I believe my longevity in the community, my work experience in healthcare, home inspection, and my many years of activism will help me to be a good legislator. And the last thing that I want to mention is I've been very fortunate to have been endorsed by the Town of Ithaca Democratic Party, the UAW, a local union, and also most recently the Working Families Party. So I'll entertain any questions folks might have. Thank you.
So I will start with, what does progressive mean to you?
Progressive means to me getting back to the roots of the Democratic Party, getting back to working class families, people who don't have the advantages of money from corporations or power in government or some other way. So it's helping make an even footing for all of those people. and then protecting all of the things that help us to have healthy lives in this community, such as social justice issues, good jobs, and protecting the environment.
And what is your approach to consensus building in a group? And please give an example that illustrates this approach.
When I was with the Sierra Club, we had a lot of different opinions, to say the least, about different issues. And as a lot of you know here, because I know that a lot of you are activists and volunteers, so volunteers are often doing that because they're very passionate about an issue. And so with some wind farms being built by out of country contractors down in the southern tier, we had a lot of controversy with the Sierra Club of whether we should be for them or against them and different issues. So we sat everybody down and we started to go over the history. We asked people, why did you join the Sierra Club to begin with? And we started with that so that people could see each other as human beings who were also passionate about most of the same things that they were, but they were just having different strategies for how to get there. And then with that tension released, we were able to solve that issue. So those are some of the techniques I use.
Are you worried about potential loss of federal funding from Medicaid? If that did happen, how would you approach this with your colleagues to do your best to ensure everyone receives health care? Well, one big thing that we need to do is figure out how to get single payer in New York. And so I think we need to do, that would, to me, be the biggest thing that we could do to help everybody. So luckily, well, I don't know if it's lucky, but they're on a break right now, the state. So if we can, keep in touch with your representatives, and maybe while they're on a break, we can figure out, what to do in the meantime. But I mean, this is an issue that I'm on. I have Obamacare, they call it, and so I had a concussion a couple of years ago, and I had a lot of things that weren't covered because I wanted to have different therapies and things like that. So it set us back, financially. And I talked to a lot of people, and they said that and the environment are their number one issues. People are really afraid in this area. So I think that's the number one thing we need to prepare for. Do you see systemic discrimination and racial exclusion in the county or municipality that you are running for? And if so, how would you address it as an elected official? What specific plans would you try to enact? If not, please describe your district. Yes, I see a lot of disparity and discrimination in my area. We have, when I was going around petitioning, for instance, going to all these different areas, and so people who don't have a lot of money or people who are a different color, then most of them are in certain areas of my district. And then we have other people in the district who are worried about affordable housing coming in and that live in the nicer areas. So I see that discrimination all the time. And I also see it when I look at our county legislature, when I look at our town officials and village officials. So I see very homogeneous group. And so I don't know what all the answers are, but I know we have a lot of talented people in this area. I know one of the things that I learned at a Justice Works conference recently was that we need to ask those populations what do they need and how can we help them move forward, because those people, the people that have the problems usually know the answer. What is your stance on increasing property taxes to address local community needs? That's a big one. I think it should be a last resort. I think we need to think holistically. When if hopefully I'm elected, I want to think about how all the different departments are interact as far as, for instance, we have issues with health care, child care, unemployment, incarceration issues, discrimination issues, and they overlap each other quite a bit. And so I think if we just look at one issue, we're going to be either causing another problem or not really getting into the whole breadth of that issue. So I think we need to look at all of those things very quickly when I, again, hopefully am a legislator, because I think we are in some ways wasting money on different things. So people have 50% of African American men in Ithaca are unemployed, and then we're housing a good percentage of them up at the jail, and there's also the addiction treatment issue. So a lot of these things overlap, and so I think if we can address the root cause of those, or as a community, I think we can lower the amount that we have to pay in services.
The IDA currently approves abatements to large developments, including hotels and residential buildings. Wow, I'm like aging. My eyes don't work like they used to. I need reading glasses. In your opinion, can you describe some of the pros and cons of this program and what requirements you would support that could benefit the community as well as the developer?
Well, that's, for me, it's an easy question. I think what we need to do is look at why we are giving tax abatements. And so, for instance, right now, how it's written for the IDA is that we give tax abatements for to support local businesses. And then the second is to create local jobs. And then the third is to increase the tax base. And right now, I see most of that going towards increasing the tax base. So another thing I want to add is to add to the criteria is environmental and racial social justice issues. And if we don't look at all of that, each time a developer comes to us, or each time we're trying to encourage development, then we're causing other problems in the community. So, such as, I just really have a hard time, for instance, why approve a luxury apartment complex, and how does that help the community? So I would want to see each project help the community in many ways versus it, just helping, okay, that helps with density, that helps with college students, but there are many more aspects of the community that we need to think about.
Cuomo wants every county in the state to look into consolidation of government offices. How do you think that Tompkins County should approach this? And how would you go about implementing your recommendation?
Well, I know the Council of Governments is working on that right now, and they're having a presentation, I think, next week about what they've come up with. I know they've struggled because the county has actually already done a lot of different things, and we don't get credit for that when they ask for, because the state is just saying, what are you doing right now? So one new thing that I hadn't thought of was a local town supervisor I was talking to recently said that they think that possibly they could combine all of their services with the village services. So that would save a huge amount of money, I believe, for that district and possibly the county. So I think we need to look at those ideas, things maybe outside of the box. The state's asking us to do this, but maybe we can just think of different things.
And this is the last question I have, and then I'll open up to the floor. If you have other paid work or family demands, can you tell us how you plan to balance your responsibilities? How many hours a week can you allot to your responsibilities at the legislature?
I'm going to let my wife answer that one. No. I'm very fortunate that I'm self-employed, so I'm a home inspector, so I can take or not take as much work, and I can schedule it all anytime, around committee meetings and things like that. So it's going to be fairly easy, and somebody's going to be cooking me dinner once in a while. And
How many hours do you expect to?
how many hours? Thank you. I'm budgeting 30 or 20 to 40 hours is what I've been hearing from legislators who I think are doing a really good job. And so that's what I'm going to budget for my schedule, 20 to 40 hours with it flexing depending on if it's budget season or things like that.
So I'm going to open it up to questions. Sarah?
Affordable housing is a very big community issue, and you mentioned that when you went door to door, quite a few people have concerns about increasing the amount of affordable housing in the county. You're sort of in that field of looking at housing. What do you know from your professional work and from what people have said? What are your ideas about increasing affordable housing?
Well, I do like with the strategic housing plan that just got adopted or approved by the county legislature. I do like a lot of things in that. There are a couple of issues that I have is that the starting housing is $150,000, and with wages being stagnant over the years, I think that's not feasible. So, for instance, when I bought my first house in 1989, a long time ago, but my house cost $62,000 in the village of Trumansburg, and I don't have that house anymore, but I checked the value the other day, and it's $140,000. My salary has stayed about stagnant from the 80s. And so if you would extrapolate that out, if income was keeping up with the price of housing in this area, my salary now should be, I think, $74,000 a year. So that is one big issue. Another thing that I'm seeing too is as I'm going around, in some areas of my district, District 5, there's 10% of the houses that are vacant, that there's just nobody there, so these are deteriorating very, very quickly. And so I'm not sure all the reasons, but we just had two houses on our street just last week get demolished because somebody had let them go to that point. So that's a lot of value and embodied energy and natural resources that are being just being lost. So we need to figure out what to do about that. That's it.
Is it anyone else? Yep, John?
With regard to affordable housing, I sold my house for exactly the reason you just said, was the increase in value, increase in property tax versus my income. I actually changed careers, and I thought I was gonna break just about even after a few years, but I went down quite a bit. And one of the options out there is tiny homes. And I can live
What
quite
kind?
comfortably like tiny homes.
Oh.
You know, but certain townships in the county, they don't want them in their town because they have wheels and they associate with trailer parks or whatever. And I'm not gonna say anything nasty about any particular township, but it seems like that is, you know, if people are in this situation and they wanna remain in the area and part of the workforce, then that's an option, except for the fact that then they're violating codes and they get all kind of harassment about living the way they're gonna live in a tiny home, right? And then so the alternative is to move to Shiloh County or to Bend or Tioga, and then you've lost the tax break, you know, and potentially you've lost the worker, you know, the workforce and so on. And it just seems like a real harsh, almost violent thing to do, to tell somebody, well, you could not live in a little tiny house like that, because, well, quite frankly, we want our township to look like an LL Meat cabinet. You know, you think there's anything to be done at the county level about that, to encourage townships, look, things are changing, people are happy living like this, it's not safe, live your restrictions?
Yes, so the county could develop a model code to give to them, but there's actually, I read recently, there is a model code that is going around the state to help municipalities deal with and to be able to allow tiny houses. And I won't say what municipalities, because I travel around a lot. Could be in the county, could be not. But one town I went to where I saw they were building a tiny home, and I asked them, is this allowed? Have you had anybody come by and say anything? And they said they had completed one, and they were told, the building person came by, the building code official came by and said, somebody cannot live here. And so they moved it to some undisclosed location. Literally, they didn't disclose it to me. So then the next town I went into recently, where I was when I was petitioning, and on this little street, right at the main road, you could see this when you walk down the road. There was a tiny house, and so I asked them how are they able to keep that there? And so this is a different municipality. They said one of their neighbors did complain, and I do hear a lot of the flack for tiny homes is people are saying, well, they're not paying property taxes if they're living in that tiny home. So that's one thing I've heard. And so this fella said that, well, somebody did complain about their tiny home being on their property, so the town official came by and said a couple of minor things that they had to do, to make it that it was actually movable, like a different size gas tank, different set of stairs, and then every 6 months they had to move it a foot. So they came by after 6 months, and they showed them the mark on the grass that it had been moved a foot, and so it's been there a couple of years.
There's no other questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.